in Descartes, but it's not that the main point is not to get right what conscientia is, but its significance for the Cartesian theory of mind more broadly. And this is why not framing this issue primarily as an issue about consciousness may help the reader or the listener, the audience to the right sort of frame of mind for what's about to come. Right. And again, before going on these bullet points on the handout, let me start with the very general background of the general reception of Descartes. So, what one could call the traditional view or the received view that there used to be the received view for a long time concerning Descartes was that Descartes' theory of mind is committed to the view that the mind is fully transparent to itself. And this type of transparency reading, starting at least from Gilbert Ryle, fortified by Rorty and so many others. And still, if you take a textbook in philosophy of mind, you're quite likely to find out that Descartes held this view. Now, there's been very forceful, very insightful criticism about this general view of Descartes, this general reception, making the point. So we identify two different strands of reactions to this general take on Descartes. That's mostly been put forward by scholars of Descartes. It seems that the transparency story have started living its own life without much regard anymore to the text of Descartes, initiated by whoever it first was. But at least those that I mentioned do play a significant role in that story. So in this critical vein, its transparency of the mind has been questioned, at least by two different ways. So part of the transparency story is that Descartes is first and foremost doing epistemology. Descartes is concerned about how can he know anything for certain. It's a story about certainty, and this makes Descartes to be an epistemologist in the first place. Now, the criticism directed at that view is that no, it's not really right to frame Descartes as an epistemologist. Descartes is doing metaphysics. Descartes wants to know how things are. That's the aim of his philosophical program. And so this is one reaction, that it just gets things started the wrong way. It's undoubtable that Descartes is interested in epistemological questions, but it's wrong to frame that as the aim of his project. Now, when we accept that, okay, these aims are metaphysical, then still these criticisms have addressed those claims from the transparency view, saying that well, the epistemic achievements of the Cartesian mind are grossly exaggerated in the transparency view, that Descartes is not really making all these claims that once just you have some mental contents, you would know them through and through, so that it comes for free for you about what you think. But that there's a lot that remains concealed from the Cartesian mind, even in its own subjective mental states. So these epistemic achievements have been radically discounted and shown to be false. The claims for full mental transparency. So this is just a very general development of how it has been going in our sort of joint investigations into the Cartesian philosophy of mind. Now to get closer to the actual topic of this talk, is that even in these, and this is the claim, that even in these critical developments that abandon the transparency view, make the point about the primacy of of metaphysics and discount the epistemic achievements, typically attributed to consciousness. Just by being conscious, you get all sorts of things for free. Now, one of the key observations that motivates our paper is that even in this critical strain, one feature is still shared with the traditional transparency view, and it is the idea that the mind is nonetheless immediately cognitively related to itself. So that even though knowledge is not for free or it doesn't come easy, still, even this critical strain is committed to the view that now the mind is immediately related to itself. What comes after that? What do you make of that? Then that's a different story. And then they are right to point out to their predecessors that it's much more complicated. It's not about transparency, but now our claim is that this immediacy, I mean, to put it very bluntly, it's a myth, a new type of myth of what's going on in Descartes. And so part of right, to make the same point in slightly different terms, and this is how I attempt to express it in the handout, saying that the claim is that accounting for our cognitive self-relation, that is our cognitive, how we know about ourselves and our own thoughts, is subordinate to Descartes' aim of accounting for the mind and world relation. So that there's a single model of cognition that is built for the mind and the extramental relation that is meant to account also for the cognitive relation that the mind bears to itself, that there's a single model. And why would that be? Now, one aspect of the already mentioned transparency view is that if you just look at like the general historiography of and Descartes' place in it, it's often described as that's when the subjective turn or the turn inwards happened, and that the subject became the thinking subject became the locus and focus of what philosophy is about, and that this change is something that we think is largely accepted also by the critical, in themselves very perceptive readings of Descartes. I mean, not totally. For instance, John Carriero, in his seminal book on Descartes' meditations, makes the point that it's important, and many others have made the point too, and we follow this suit, is that Descartes does take part in the long Aristotelian realist tradition, where the mind-world relation is the primary thing to be accounted for. Like, just quote from the paper, it's not on the handout, but Carriero writes that Descartes shares with his scholastic predecessors the basic tenet that cognition involves a common reality, form or structure existing both in the mind, that is objectively in Cartesian terminology, and in the world formally in Cartesian terminology, even at the level of sensory cognition. So that there's some sort of a conformity, a very basic elementary fundamental conformity between mind and the world. So this is something in which Descartes just continues the tradition. He fully keeps with this general aim. Now, nevertheless, like Carriero definitely is one of those very, very perceptive critics and has a very, very compelling and original interpretation of Descartes' meditations. Still, we think, as far as we can tell, he would also accept nevertheless, despite of all this, the immediacy of the most fundamental self-relation, that there is no mediation of ideas about your consciousness or cognition about yourself. And this is what we want to challenge now with this paper. So now to put out the view outright, we call this the objective reality view of consciousness and cognition. And it might be characterized as follows: that consciousness in our reading is merely presentation of content. So self-awareness builds on it, and all robust forms of cognition build on it. We affirm, deny, doubt, and so forth what we are conscious of. So we have to be conscious of something in order to apply any further mental operations, mental acts on those contents. But what consciousness strictly taken is, it's only presentation of the content. Very bluntly put, I'm perceiving this bottle, and so I have the perceptual content, and what consciousness is a presentation of that content to me. I become conscious of that content, and this is the only place where the Cartesian conscientia is strictly and properly applied to, according to our reading. And now you can already see that if this is the case, then if you're going to be conscious of yourself, it has to come through being conscious of the content. There's no other way on the side. There's not another immediate way of being conscious of yourself on the side. This is the only way to do it. I'll say something slightly more particular about this in a minute, but this is just to lay out the claim, so that there should be no big reveal is anymore coming. It's all said now. The rest of the talk is an attempt to persuade to accept this view and claim. So let's start from just some of the key notions of Descartes. I mean, of course, those of you who are well versed in Descartes, there would be little news in this, but not everybody are. So hopefully this is helpful in getting the sort of the basic pieces of the puzzle right. So the first observation is that for Descartes, having an idea or perceiving or thinking, they're all the same thing. I mean, they're roughly synonymous with one another. There will be important nuances in which you could not just swap any of all of these terms, but roughly that's what he's committed to. And now, one way to say it as it is on the handout, that's like the fourth item that equals the previous three, hosting mental content. So the idea of this is that that's really the principal attribute of mind. So you probably know that Descartes is a substance dualist. Those two substances are really distinct from one another. The body is the extended substance, and its principal attribute is extension. Now, mind is the non-material, non-extended substance, and its principal attribute, Descartes says, is thought or thinking. But that in itself is not as self-explanatory as extension is. Extension isn't either, but it's easier to grasp what extension is than what thought is. But you immediately have further questions that, what do you mean by thought, right? Now harking back to the point about Descartes partaking the scholastic tradition, the realist tradition. I mean, what is mind for? It's your interface to the world. So what does it do? It hosts the ideas. It hosts these representations through which you encounter the extramental, the world outside the mind. That's what it's for. That's the principal attribute of the mind, to host mental content, to host ideas. It's a host. That's what it does. That's the principal thing. So, for instance, in the Ryle claims that what is the principle? That it's consciousness. That's what the mind really is. It's consciousness. It's this awareness that characterizes the mind in the first place. That's the essence of the mind. But that seems to be wrong, and most of the more recent scholars agree about that. That's not right. That's part of the deflationary take a project about consciousness against the transparency reading, but we want to be more deflationary about consciousness than the critics of the transparency view. And so that's our claim for what thinking means as Descartes uses it as a name for the principal attribute of thought. The principal attribute of thought is to host mental content. Now, and it's right that having an idea, so we all know that Descartes is committed to the view that whenever you think, you cannot fail to be conscious of your thinking. But that's also very vague, although it's correct. So having an idea entails that which is presently thought about is in some sense in the idea. And here the key distinction for Descartes is that things enjoy formal reality in themselves as they are in the world, but when we are thinking of them, they gain objective reality in the mind, right? So this is and objective doesn't mean objective as we use it in many ways. It is as an object, so it has an existence as an object in the mind. And now the realism really, which is not the topic of this talk, depends on what Descartes thinks about the distinction between the formal reality of the thing out there and its objective reality in my mind. So that relation either Descartes is a full-blown representationalist or is committed to Bale of Ideas and so forth, depending on exactly how that relation is spelled out. But that's not the topic of this talk. Just roughly, Descartes is a realist. He would think that yes, whenever we have thoughts that would particularly clear and distinct thoughts, then we can know that we've grasped something about the experimental reality. Nevertheless, this talk is about how do we relate to this objective idea, this objective being in the mind. And whenever there's something objectively existing in my mind, whenever I'm, in other words, thinking about something, I become conscious of this idea. So that's the place of consciousness. Now, Descartes definitely is not as explicit about things as we would wish, which is partly explained by the huge amount of scholarly literature there is in order to decipher what's going on there. But I think that there's at least one quite underappreciated passage where Descartes, for instance, Descartes uses the term conscientia in the Meditations only a couple of times, so just terminologically, it seems that it's not important to him, which is a fair point. But it's not just the occasions or the appearances of the term that would decide the philosophical significance of a notion for a thinker. But there's a place in the addenda to the second Meditations where Descartes clearly uses conscientia in a technical term for a philosophical purpose. And this is where he is defining the terms. He gives explicit definitions of what thought is and what idea is. And this is on the bottom of the first page of the handout. And Descartes says that thought is a term that I use to include everything that is within us in such a way that we are immediately conscious of it. Thus, all the operations of the will, the intellect, the imagination, and the senses are thoughts. So all these counts as thoughts. I say immediately so as to exclude the consequences of thoughts. A voluntary movement, for example, originates in a thought, but is not in itself a thought. So that's a definition of thought. Thought is something with immediate consciousness, but then comes idea. And this is crucial. He says that I understand this term, that is the term idea, to mean the form of any given thought, immediate perception of which makes me conscious of this thought. So when I perceive the form of thought, which Descartes calls idea, there's an immediate perception that makes me conscious of this thought. So and this is what we claim, that now the form of thought or the idea used here is the idea in the objective sense. This is as the mind hosts some objective reality. This is an immediate, when I immediately, and I can't help it, perceive, I become conscious of it. And this is really the only place where conscientia, the technical notion of conscientia, happens for Descartes. So this is the key textual evidence that for our reading, that this is the right place, the correct place and role of consciousness in Descartes. Now, so again, on the second page, Descartes is by and large subscribes to an act-content view of how the mind works. The content is presented to the mind in the mind's acts of thinking. And the immediate perception of what is presented in the act makes me conscious of what is presented. Just as I already said. But now what muddied these waters is that idea is ambiguous for Descartes. So he explains to us in the third meditation, I think, that now idea can be taken in two respects. There's the objective idea, as I already explained, and then it can also be thought of material. And material, it is an operation of the intellect, while objectively it is the thing represented by that operation. So the two aspects to the idea. So whenever I receive some idea through the causal chain of various bodily events, for instance, or that otherwise, it doesn't really matter how it comes to be, but there will be a causal origin for all the ideas that I have in my mind. So the mental act that does the hosting, so to speak, Descartes calls the idea materially taken, while the idea, insofar as it contains some objective reality, is the idea objectively taken. And now our claim is that it's this idea objectively taken that Descartes is talking about in the definition of idea. This is what I become immediately conscious of, and not the material idea, which is the act of my mind. If I would become immediately conscious of the idea materially taken, then I would be immediately related to myself. So like in phenomenological terms, it means that when I'm, and our sort of everyday phenomenology confirms that when I'm perceiving this pen, I mean, that seems to be the thematic, thematized object of my consciousness. But peripherically, at the same time, I am conscious of myself perceiving this pen, and I might also be conscious of my mental act, that this is an act of perception rather than an act of imagination or act of will. Or if I will this pen, I'm perceiving it. It's objectively presented to me, but I'm peripherically or on the side also conscious of my willing. And when I'm conscious of my willing it, then I'm conscious of something that pertains to me. Doesn't pertain to the pen, but it's a feature of me. And now this is what all those critical readings also accept. That so you become conscious of two different things at once: the primary object and the secondary object, which is you. And this is what we want to deny. So this is the received view that we call the formal reality view. We call it the formal reality view because now the formal and material here are roughly synonymous. When you think of the idea materially, then it is the formal reality of that idea. I mean, its own raw being that according to these FR views, you become conscious of, on top of becoming conscious of what is presented to you. And this seems to be something that, to our knowledge, pretty much everybody accept, most of them implicitly. This seems to be some this is why we called it a myth, that because it seems to be broadly accepted. There are a few scholars that have expressly and explicitly said that this is how they read it. And here I have just two examples on the handout. Dermot Moran, for instance, says that the thinking act is already contentful in a particular way. And when it's thinking act, you then think about the act, not the content, the thing that the mind does. That it is already contentful in a particular way. Thinking on its own is independent of its content. So see that the content is used here twice. So it's already contentful, independent of its content. So it gets terminologically messy. Nevertheless, that thinking on its own has a phenomenological character. There's something in this like to imagine as opposed to remember, will, judge, and so on. And so imagining, remembering, willing, judging, and so they are all mental acts. They are not types of contents, but they are operations that the mind performs, so that you're already aware of that. So this is an explicit commitment to what we call an FR view. Then there's a Lili Alanen's seminal book on Descartes' philosophy of mind. She makes the same point. I didn't take the quotation here because you have to part together from various parts, but nevertheless, she's explicitly commits to this. Carriero, for instance, at least in the whole big book, doesn't really say one way or another. And but then the most clear commitment to this is by Alison Simmons, and this is a paraphrase of her view, but I'm pretty sure she would accept this. That the mind is conscious of the content as well as the act, because there are two objects. Through representation, an act of thought has something as its first object, and through immediate acquaintance, it has itself as a second object. So there's always a great risk of offering any pictorial clarifications because it might get things wrong, but I'll try. So here's some instrumental thing that enjoys its own formal reality, and it gains objective reality here. This is the idea within the idea, and now this arrow signifies consciousness. So and the circle signifies the idea materially taken. So this is as it were the container and the contained. And now if we in our reading, if the strict notion of Descartes' consciousness means being presented with the content, then this is what so then this drawing would account for what conscientia is for Descartes. But now the FR views, and they may come in many flavors, I'm not sure, but I think that the Simmons' version, which is the most articulate one around, would say that there's also another arrow that goes like this, so that you'd be conscious of the objective reality contained in the idea and the formal reality, that is the idea materially taken, which is it's a modification of your own mental substance, of your own mind, and thereby you are conscious of yourself. And that happens immediately, because there is this idea mediates your cognitive relation to this acts, but there's nothing to mediate your consciousness towards the mental act that you have. So that's one attempt at a very, very straightforward and simple pictorial representation of what might be going on. So according to this formal reality views, the mind is conscious of the idea not only objectively but also materially. It's immediately conscious of its own formal reality through instantiating what might be called the reflexive property, that is the pen's arrow that turns back to where it came from, by virtue of which it has itself as the secondary object, alongside with what the thought is primarily about. Now, this seems a very, it seems that this model has good explanatory force for what is going on in Descartes. But now, I think that it gets gets this force by illegitimate means. And so why not? Well, why isn't this reading correct in our view? Now, and this is the next bigger bullet on the handout of page 2. So on an FR view, the principal attribute of thought is responsible for 2 distinct jobs. That is, it explains why modes of thinking have a reflexive property, resulting in cognitive relation to the mind's own form and reality, and why modes of thinking host content, that is, involve a cognitive relation to what is in the objective idea. So there are 2 jobs that's doing, and of course, once you get many jobs done, then that's good. But whether Descartes can afford that, we don't think so, because this is incompatible with the unity of substances. Remember that if the principal attribute of thought is to host ideas, so this is what defines the unity of the mental substance. Just like anything that is a modification of a body or matter has to be about extension. So regardless of how far you go in a way with the chains of modifications, you have to be able to read out from the mode to which of the 2 substances it belongs to. So anything that belongs to body, you should be able to indicate or detect extension in it. Then you can refer it back to the body, because you have detected the principal attribute of bodies, that is extension. Now the same applies to minds. You have to be able to detect hosting. That's what the principal attribute is. It's the hosting that tells you that okay, this is a modification of mind, because the principal attribute is manifested in the mode. And now this 2 job thing becomes a problem from this point of view. So that's what is it at the very heart of the Cartesian metaphysics is substance, attribute, mode, ontology. You have the substances have the primary attributes, and then you have all sorts of individual modes. So this shape, that shape, so forth, they are all modes of the extended substance. My thinking of the Eiffel Tower or bottle of mezcal or whatnot, they are all individual modifications, particular modes of my mind, and they all sort of trace back to the substance modifications of which they are. So Descartes wants to provide an explanatorily complete account of thinking substances in accordance with this unified nature of substance, in this case, the unified nature of mind. There's one essential feature that picks out minds as contrasted to bodies. So substances have a unified essence, and they exhibit in each and every of their modes. So distinctive of a principal attribute is that it has one and exactly one specific kind of modifiability. Thought is modifiable with regard to what it hosts, as just said. That is what exists objectively in it. That's how it's modified. Extension, for its part, is modifiable with respect to spatiality. So these modes are ways of being of the principal attribute of substance. That is, ways of being of its nature or essence. And dependence of modes on substances is both metaphysical and explanatory. Modes, Descartes says, are referred to the principal attribute, and that the modes are unintelligible if not understood in terms of the principal attribute. And now mental modes are intelligible only in terms of the principal attribute of hosting. And now we can see that the FR view is committed that hosting, like on this drawing, is self-conscious. So what is happening there is hosting, but it's also self-conscious hosting. You don't host the X just being conscious of the X, but you're hosting the X such that you're conscious of both the X and yourself. So they want to have these two things going on at once. But now the reflexive property turns out to be an arbitrary addition to the attribute's modifiability, namely of hosting objects, because it's not itself a hosting of this or that object. It's an immediate relation to the bare existence of something that is your own mind, or it's through its particular modification. So you've lost the unity of the principal attribute of hosting, and this arbitrariness is something that Descartes cannot accept, because this is the very heart of his metaphysics. So compare, as if extension would not merely involve modifiability with regard to spatiality, that is with length, depth, but also something in addition that is disconnected from spatiality. And this breakage of the unity of the mind, Descartes cannot accept. So that's our main philosophical argument against the FR view. And for the objective reality view, as our view, that is committed that hosting is the exclusive respect in which the mind's principal attribute, thought, is modifiable. And there is not this extra sui generis self-reflexive property, because Descartes' metaphysics cannot allow it. As nice as an explanation of the thing it at first sight looks to be. So that's really the view now. And so there would be more, but now you can see that I won't give you the details. Maybe it's not the details of how on the overview you can explain the cognitive access that you have to yourself. We have a full story about that, but maybe just the main outlines is enough. So as we already had the phenomenological example, that nevertheless it seems to be the case. So now one would tell us that, well, when I'm looking at these things, perceiving all these things, I seem to be conscious of myself and my mental activity. But you're claiming that, no, you're not. You're only conscious of what is objectively contained in the idea. So then how do you account for this? The reflexive view would account for it nicely. She said, well, it would, yeah, but Descartes cannot afford it. So now we have to provide a different type of explanation in order to respect what is obviously the case. Yeah, we are aware of ourselves and aware of various mental operations that we perform. So the way we are explaining this with support from Descartes' text from various places is that the content gets modified. Well, modified is it gets altered in ways so that whatever, if it's only this X or whatever is in the square, let's say, if it's only that we can get conscious of. So if I am going to be conscious of myself, I have to get somehow being represented here within the square quotes, right? And so the latter part of the paper explains the various ways in which this X here within the idea gets modified such that perceiving it explains the resulting phenomenology of me being afraid of a lion or desiring beer or and also in the sense that when I'm perceiving this bottle, I'm just not merely perceiving the bottle. I'm perceiving it as something, as certain distance within myself and so forth. And Descartes has a story, particularly in terms of visual perception, of how various types of in themselves unconscious mental operations account for the phenomenological content of for instance, distance perceiving. And those are cases where Descartes clearly allows the alteration by the mind of the objective content within the idea. And this is roughly, well, this is the model through which we explain that how come ourselves, so to speak, become represented as part of the content of the idea. But then getting into the details of how that happens, then that will involve looking at passages in Descartes about visual perception and so forth. So maybe just for clarity's sake, it's best to stop here and let the main claim be out there. But I'm more than happy to take any questions and comments concerning any of the aspects of the paper. Thanks so much for your attention.
Well, I'll start with a brief comment about this presentation. I had the opportunity to read the complete draft, so maybe I'll say things that were not mentioned, but I think that you can clear them after my commentary. And this is in case something. So I'm going to read it. It's brief. Okay? Well, thank you very much. To begin, I want to thank Aurelia Valero for inviting me to comment on this text about the Cartesian mind. And of course, thank to Professor Lähteenmäki for this presentation. The question posed by the text, we hear about the possibility of having an immediate access to the contents of the mind, seem fundamental to understand Cartesianism. We know today, of course, and especially after philosophical and even therapeutic proposals, such as those of Freud, Nietzsche, Schopenhauer, or Kant, that the access of the mind itself to all its components is restricted. German thinkers found in the 19th century that mind can fail to see itself, as an eye cannot perceive what it is exactly. We don't know with certainty the origin of our desires, and we must accept limits of representation and blind spots of thought. Of course, the interest is to ask about the mind within Cartesian philosophy, and not how we will answer these questions today facing the whole history of philosophy. As Professor Lähteenmäki has shown, this is a complex task. Cartesian philosophy is a kind of puzzle made with a desire for certainty, but it does not eliminate some obscurities and does not answer all the questions, especially those that arise centuries later. Remember that Descartes is an author who has at least 3 stages of doctrine development. There may be a slight variation on the nature of some elements, such as mind, in different works. For example, in the rules, he defines thought as a unitary force, while in meditations, he more carefully distinguishes the operations of thought and makes the cogito the fulcrum of his entire onto-epistemology. Interesting routes and alternatives could appear if one takes into account the variations on the concept of mind in Cartesian philosophy, which, from my point of view, must be read considering the chronology, continuities, and internal ruptures of the French philosopher's project. Professor Lähteenmäki has pointed out important passages, particularly from the meditation and their commentaries, where the author, Descartes, explains his theory of ideas. The theory of ideas is the great lifeline that Descartes finds to avoid being devoured by skepticism in the scenarios that he describes. Descartes supposes a privileged access of the mind to itself. In fact, what we are in essence is our inner life. How could be dark to us what we really are? Ideas, the cells of this inner life, must be clear to us. But what is an idea? and how much it implies. The presentation we have heard has problematized these matters. Answer this must understand the process of representation in the mind, as well as the nature of complex ideas. For example, the desire to eat an ice cream includes the representation of the ice cream, maybe a specific one, but also my desire to taste it. This also means distinguishing between objective and formal elements of thought, which Descartes suggests going in combo. They go together. Professor Lähteenmäki has pointed out that this combo suggests various difficulties. Other elements that he calls modifiers are required to complete the explanation of what happens when we think, processes that we are not necessarily aware of. There is one point, however, which is not considered in the analysis that has been presented and which I suggest studying. The fact that the mind is never really isolated from the world or separated from the body, as Descartes suggests in his early meditations. Certainly, it cannot be ignored the radical distinction between mind and body, whose natures are incompatible. But it cannot be overlooked that when we reach the sixth meditation, Descartes reminds us that experience shows us that we are not in our body like a pilot in his ship. On the contrary, we are deeply linked to our body. In experience, we do not know where the body begins and where the mind begins and ends. The problem is that although the mind might be transparent to us, the body is not. This union between body and mind must have profound consequences on how we conceive the Cartesian conception of mind, even beyond what the thinker himself describes in previous passages. The privileged access of the mind to itself can be rarefied when it unites with the body, and in fact, this is what happens daily, as Descartes exposes in The Passions of the Soul. To be brief, I would like to complete my comment in the suggestion to enrich this work, taking account chronology of Descartes' work, and of course, sixth meditation. Also, I take this opportunity to invite Professor Lähteenmäki to know the large number of works of Cartesianism that has been developed in Mexican philosophy, starting with Luis Villoro, who we celebrated a few weeks before, Soraya Monroy, Alejandra Velázquez, and of course, Laura Benítez, who is our authority in the study of Cartesianism and whom we appreciate very deeply in this instance. Thank you very much. And if you want, you can say something.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate all you having read the work and giving this comment. Yeah, let me start about I know of there being a lot of Mexican philosophy in Descartes, but not the substance, because I mean I'm linguistically challenged and most of it in Spanish. And it would be great to be able to study it more deeply. So thank you for this encouragement. Let me say about the sixth meditation and the role of body a bit, and how it relates to what was claimed. So most of the what are called modifiers. For instance, when I already explained that Descartes feels the urge to give an explanation of why we perceive things as they are. He would have the three grades of sensory response, and his example of the stick bent in water, and how that comes about, and so forth. And this is clearly an embodied. All the sensation takes place. All sensory occasions are occasions for the embodied embodied mind. And part of how the body is present then in these types of sensory situations is exactly through the modifiers. So one class of the modifiers we call projectors, which are habitual judgments that make us experience that objects are, first of all, external to us. I mean, I couldn't think of this being some distance from my mind unless I thought my mind is embodied already. So it needs to, so the spatial location, my experience of the spatial location comes from the embodiedness. And the Descartes then goes on and explains of how these projectors work on the objective content such that the end result is the phenomenological state that it is. So in this sense, yeah, I think that this story is well compatible with the sixth meditation considerations about the embodied condition of the mind, and that really indeed is the way we spend our lives, embodied. Yes.
Well, now we have some times in case there are some other questions. Yes.
Oh, thanks for the talk. I a bit. So it's been a while since I read Descartes, and so there are some things that I thought I knew about whether the mind is transparent or whether we have immediate access to it. And now I don't know how to fit this information with your views about Descartes. So I guess what I want is for you to explain to me how to make these two things fit. So when I was studying Descartes a long time ago, I thought I was very puzzled about the evil being, right? So it was very puzzling to me. Why is it that the evil demon could deceive me about whether 2 + 2 = 4, but not about whether it seems to me that I am perceiving, let's say, white? So then I thought, well, it must be because if I'm to know whether 2 + 3 + 4, I have to perform some computations. I have to, entertain the number 2, the plus sign, the 2, and then conclude that equals 4. And then I thought, well, the evil demon there has plenty of opportunity to, deceive me.
Yeah.
But then I thought, well, it must be Descartes' view that when I consider whether it seems to me that I seem white, if the evil demon cannot deceive me about that, it must be because I don't have to perform any sort of computation. So it has to be somehow immediate and transparent. Otherwise, the evil demon would have plenty of opportunity to deceive me about that. First, if you can tell me whether I'm understanding Descartes correctly, and if I am, how to fit this kind of reasoning with your view, because it's not obvious to me how to do it.
Yeah, good. Thanks. That's an excellent question, and it is a genuinely challenging question too. So, but maybe first on the side note about 2 + 2 = 4, Descartes also thinks that, his view of God's omnipotence is such that it really could be something else. This is what it means to be omnipotent. The mathematics could be different. So we have no way of imagining what it would be like, obviously, but he could make a world where that would not be right. But that's a side note. Yeah. So right. So maybe that is what he's thinking. So that there's no space for error, so to speak. No wedge can be driven with whatever you're doing. This is why you are warranted to be convinced of your own existence, right? So that seems to be about right. Now, one distinction to draw here is that when you're reading the meditations, and these are epistemic considerations, right? So you just have no room for doubt. This is how Descartes is framing it. It seems to be an epistemic form of immediacy. In the sense that there's no wedge for the doubt to get in. And it seems that it might be, people seem to think, so those I was quoting in the beginning about those who accept the formal reality view, they seem to have this thought in the back of their minds. They don't explicate it, but it seems natural to think that that's what is there, that if this epistemic certainty that I gained from in the cogito, or thinking about myself as a thinker and just attempting to doubt it. Now the explanation that why I can't doubt it, they seem to think that because there's a metaphysical grounding for it. It is because the formal reality, because it is ontologically immediate. It's not mediated by anything. So now see the mediation that you were referring to in the case of performing calculations. It's a mediation of steps, right? So that's within the epistemic sphere still, but the type of immediacy that we are denying is the ontological type of immediacy. Now it might still be that this is just how the world works. I mean, try to doubt your own existence, they have to do all you can. But when you read the meditation, nowhere he says that the reason for your inability to doubt your existence is because the metaphysics is like this. Because the metaphysics instantiates an immediate ontological relation that your cognition or that the material idea grasps itself. So this is ontological thought. These are on the items, while the doubting is something epistemic. So that's probably our answer, that Descartes is not making the point. I mean, philosophically, it might still be a problem for Descartes, but at least as far as the textual evidence goes, he doesn't seem to think so. He doesn't seem to think that you need a metaphysical grounding for this certainty that results from doubt. Rather, it seems to be a feature of doubting itself that just gives me the certainty about my own existence. So that's the distinction I would draw, that you might still have this epistemic story, as you were telling it, without needing it to be backed up by a story of immediacy on the ontological level. So what we are saying, that your self-relation is still mediated, because you need to be represented to yourself in the objective idea, right? So now one might go about there that, well, it's still much closer, yourself. You are much closer to yourself than you are to the Eiffel Tower. So that still metaphysically there's not that much considerations, but the best case is that he never says so. He never says that the certainty needs to have a grounding in the immediacy of your idea being translucent to yourself. I mean, ontologically speaking.
I think I follow, but I'm not using your terminology. So if that's the view, then how come the evil demon could not draw a wedge between these two things?
I don't know. I'm not sure why he couldn't drive a wedge. I mean, anyway, I'm not. Well, here's one thing. I mean, I'm really answering with a question, because even if it is ontologically immediate, I'm not quite sure how that effectively blocks some evil demon scenario from distorting what is going on.
Was not because the evil demon makes your inference power be distorted, and there you don't need to make inference.
But I guess the point you're making is, let's suppose there is no, how do you phrase it with the ontological point? Can you repeat that?
Well, there's no space. I think that's
Yeah, at the ontological level.
Yeah.
But then you may think, well, that doesn't imply that you don't need any sort of reasoning to get.
No, I think that it's like, well, so now one thing, whether it is reasoning or not, there's this, the Jaakko Hintikka paper is famous on this, whether it's performative and not an act of reasoning. And I guess that in these discussions, the point of reasoning is that because there's steps. I mean, you might sort of forget what you already accepted. I mean, it's this type of gaps in process reasoning that you. I mean, for Descartes' scientia, you need the proof of God's existence in order to perform anything so long that you've actually sort of forgotten why it was clear and distinct to you, the previous step, and then the next step, and so forth. So you need an external guarantee that it is it. But you can be wrong. You can have clear. I mean, even the atheists can have clear and distinct ideas of some like momentary, non-inferential contents, right? So yeah, but it might. We're moving to considering it as a philosophical problem. And I'm not quite sure what Descartes would say. I mean, in either case, I mean, just for the purposes of this claim of being the right reading of the conscientia, I still don't see why that would be the silver bullet that the FR has, that the certainty of the cogito would be saved by having the immediacy on the ontological level. I mean, at the very least, if Descartes would have thought that this is crucial for the cogito, we have all the reason to expect him to have said so in meditations.
Yeah, that's very well.
But then what really is the right analysis of what's going on in the cogito and certainty? I don't know. I think I tend to say that it's just sort of proof itself. If it's indubitable, then it's indubitable. And Descartes seems to think that, well, then you don't need a more fundamental story in terms of a metaphysical structure to back it up. Whatever weaknesses is a philosophical position that may have.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes. First, if I understand correctly, the medical ideas are part of the spiritual substance, not the material. Correct. Given that, if I don't understand how an interpretation like that was around there, or the other that you did mention, delve a lot into, and perhaps it's main framework with reflective perception or that is in there. How is that compatible with the argument of dream? Because you see that if we have that, then we wouldn't have any chance to have the confusion of illusions and effective perception of dreams and natural experience, because we will know that it's just in our idea. And all this seems to contradict that, which I think is one of the main arguments and problems that he poses in the meditations. So how is the dream argument still handled in this in this context that you are posing?
I am not sure I follow fully. So if you allow a question, so do you think that the two accounts, whether you have just the one arrow or the two arrows, makes a difference?
Well, I'm saying that I don't see how I can pose as being heretical the question of of the problem of dreaming, saying I cannot distinguish whether I'm dreaming or not. If I were understanding mind in that way, because it seemed to already entail capacity of distinguishing what is purely in mind and what is purely caused, not purely in the mind and therefore caused externally, which seems to be what is possibly difficult or not known how to do.
Okay, so is this sort of almost the same question, but in a different form in the sense?
No, because mind doesn't imply any genius or anything. Mind is just the conception. This conception doesn't seem to make it possible to pose the argument of dreaming, because it's already implying that there is another thing, and that I don't know when there is another thing that is causing these ideas that I'm contemplating.
I'm not sure if I follow. So the dream argument is that you don't know, you can't be assured about the contents. You don't know what you perceive. What you're perceiving, you don't know whether it's caused by dream, that is yourself generating this stuff, or whether it comes from without, right?
Yes.
And so that concerns the objective content that you are presented with, right? So you pass a judgment about the objective ideas that you have in your mind. That is the objective reality that is presented to you, and you often go astray anyway. I mean, all our perceptions are completely messed up. I mean, we don't really, the world is not what it seems to us. I mean, this is clear for Descartes, and the dream argument is like that. But even within the dream, I mean, doesn't the cogito apply there as well? So quite regardless of whether I'm dreaming or not, I can become ascertained that I am hosting this content, to use my terminology. So that's what you can achieve in any case, and then with the proof of God's existence and so forth, then you get rid of the dreams. Then you are in a much better position to pass judgments about the contents of your thoughts. So now one might go further and make the point that was made now. Okay, so if also you yourself are presented to yourself as part of the content, which is otherwise completely misleading, you think it's real, but no, it's not. It's illusionary and so forth. Why wouldn't you yourself, as you presented as part of the content, be illusory as well? And I can see that it might lead to that. So that if you would have this arrow here somehow, then that would lift the possibility or prevent the possibility of distortion, and that's fine. And I mean that it's a very understandable and motivated question. But here again, my answer would be the same as it was to you, that, well, there's just no consideration of this type of ontology in Descartes as a ground for why, as a ground for certainty, as a ground for epistemic achievement. So the epistemic achievement seem not to be given any grounding in terms of what is going on in the ontology of ideas. So he just seems to think that doubting in itself harbors this power of conferring certainty without any considerations of what is the metaphysical reality that underlies. So basically my answer is the same to you.
Yes, Aurelia?
Yeah, thank you, Vili, for your talk. I must say I feel very frustrated because you're debunking the one thing I thought about, that I thought I knew about Descartes. And so I will need to read it again many times after this talk. And I'm still curious, I mean, you say that the meditations on first philosophy are mainly metaphysical and not considerations on epistemology. But some of these treatises, they were actually thought as, as introductions to his science work. So it was kind of the introduction to understand his works on science. So I'm not so sure that epistemology comes second in Descartes' considerations. And also, well, I mean, the implications are huge. I still have the same kind of doubts that does knowledge or certainty becomes probabilistic, for example, once you give way to once you don't consider consciousness as transparent and self-reflective. And also I wanted to ask you, I mean, you, at the end of your talk, you announced, well, you said, well, how do we relate to ourselves? And how you've been explaining it by distance. So that means it's a matter of degree. And again, would that be probabilistic, like the closer we are the more certainty? Well, how do we, I mean, I'm not clear about what kind of knowledge is achieved once we abdicate these two principles, transparency and well, reflect and immediacy to ourselves.
So, well, the start with the relationship between epistemology and metaphysics in the meditations, that the observation was mainly meant to be concern the previous tradition of interpreting Descartes, and that surely you cannot do metaphysics without asking after knowledge, but it's not the aim. Descartes is a real. I mean, realism is, and how can we grasp if we accept that there's basic conformity between the world and the mind. That's he wants to get that metaphysics right, and he wants to get the metaphysics of the real distinction right. And once you get the metaphysics of the real distinction right, then you go on towards the sixth meditation and see that, well, we embodied, and so what Descartes thinks about the metaphysical achievements then is such that one way to read is that Descartes is really driving towards conceptual clarity, that we can understand better our embodied state. Once we have these concepts clear, that, well, this did not satisfy Princess Elizabeth to the least, because, well, people are usually being very, very confused that once we get this metaphysics right, it seems that gives us no guidance whatsoever in our daily lives. But anyway, the point being that surely he wants to do metaphysics, and this was discounted in the earlier tradition of reading Descartes. And then about the distance and whether knowledge becomes probabilistic, surely not. The knowledge, for instance, the cogito knowledge is not probabilistic. That's utmost certainty. And I guess Cartesian science by and large, it's about if you have, it's of course a long story why clear and distinct ideas would warrant indubitable knowledge, but whenever you have them, then it's not probabilistic. Whether you buy the story of why clear and distinct ideas warrant indubitable knowledge is a different thing, but that seems clear that Descartes thinks that yes, that's for sure then. And the distance is, if I understand right, the distance by and large I mean, your distance to yourself. And on our view, there is certain distance to yourself, because I mean, it's not immediate. If you're conscious of yourself, you cannot doubt it. Yet there is a distance on the ontological level, because you have to be presented to yourself. There is no immediate way of cognizing yourself. Again, I would just offer the same that I already offered to the two previous questions, that it is an attractive thought that okay, once you just nail two things together, then all the worries about getting wrong about the one just vanishes, because there's nothing can distort that. But it just does not seem to be Descartes' view that that's going on. I would like to actually add one thing about this, that I mean, a further reason for not endorsing the formal reality view is that consciousness also would then have two very different types of objects. So it would apply to objective beings, to objective reality, and formal reality, that is the bare existence of things. So maybe there's only one, you yourself, but that like, while the phenomenology supports the idea that I am conscious of more than one type of thing at once, that is what is presented to me, my thinking of this, what is presented to me, and myself as the thinker of that. So the phenomenology seems to support that these things are going on at once. But then the way they explain it is that you are conscious of a formal reality as well as an objective reality, and they are two different types of categories of being, and this is also something that seems to be that's not the natural thought. I mean, there's no explicit discussion about that in Descartes, nor is there any explicit discussion about that among those who accept the formal reality view. They don't try to justify why these two very different types of objects would be naturally natural contents of consciousness. So that was a further thing that I wanted to add in favor of the objective reality view. And of course, again, repeating what I already said, that if you have these resources, of course, when you have a lot of resources, then it's easier to explain things. And now the question is rather than whether Descartes has these resources, and this seems just that he doesn't. And then you have to give other types of explanations with less resources, and that's typically not, of course, as easy as it is with plenty of theoretical resources.
Any other question or comment? Yes.
Thank you so much. Can you say a little bit more about this incompatibility between the formal reality view and the thinking of the center? I mean, I don't understand why that you cannot, or the dog cannot be one, and at the same time, the relative loss that is the reflexive one that we're talking about, and the host content one. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Okay, so that why these two things can't be there at once for Descartes? Well, so the idea is this, that okay, well, that's an idea. Here's a substance. So that's much sturdier than an idea. So, and the substance gets modified. So in various ways. So here's a mode of it, here's another mode of it, here too, and so forth. So and this is a substance, the principal attribute of which is to host, right? So this principal attribute needs to be exemplified in each and every of these things that are modes of this substance, right? And now Descartes is just very clearly committed to the unity of the substances. because now there would be an extra thing in all of these, say the reflexive property. But this reflexive property is not explained by the principal attribute of hosting. It's something extra, it's sui generis, something like that. Now, say that you're detecting this relatively distant mode of this substance, and you're looking only at this aspect of it, you would be able to track it down to the mind, because it doesn't exemplify the principal attribute of this substance. So this is why this is why the unity is important. So why wouldn't matter be able to have this for us? So you wouldn't know that it needs to be a mental mode. That's why it seems that the unity is so important to Descartes. And if you take the analogy of extension, so you would have the 3 dimensions, and then there would be an extra P that they have, and then it would be the same. You wouldn't by that feature of the mode of extension, you wouldn't know that this belongs to body. So this is why the unity, it has to permeate, the principal attribute needs to permeate each and every of the modes. So that's the argument in the nutshell, and that's why the unity is so important. The unity is important for the real distinction.
We have time for yes, yeah.
I was thinking of this model of representation of reality. I was thinking it can be applied to artificial agent in order to give them the capacity of taking decisions, or to help them to have consciousness.
Oh, so can it be? I don't know. I don't know how they program them. So do you mean that that the representational model in general is required to consciousness?
Yes, if it can be the start of programming consciousness.
I'm afraid anything that I would say would be fully speculative. I mean, I don't have a good view of that. I'm sorry for that.
I don't. Yes.
Consciousness account for self-deception.
That's a tough one. I haven't thought about it. So, firstly, it would not give an explanation of self-deception. That's something much more robust than the basic way in which the mind works in a level of the mechanism of ideas. But might be, given that self-deception is possible, that might set some kind of a challenge about compatibility, whether there is something in this that would not allow it. At first sight, it seems to me that why not? I mean, given the X, we already have the dream case. So whatever gets presented in the objective idea, then you judge. That's about judging. That's a second order reflective act. So what the consciousness doesn't do much. It only mental activity. So insofar as this model does not prevent self-deceptive contents be presented to you, I think that's well compatible with self-deception.
We have time for another question or comment. I have one. I might insist about 6 meditation and pasiones del alma, passions also. because I think that this kind of explanation is compatible with the first part of meditations, but in the sixth part, everything is like messy and we don't know well where we are now, and maybe the mind there functions in another way. That's why Descartes had to write another book to explain now a different communication between body and soul and how they act together in our daily life. So what would you think about that?
Yeah, I think this is all fine. I mean, it's that's a further story of what the. I mean, I talked about phenomenology already, but in a very non-committal, non-programmatic way. But the six meditations and the passions, together with Descartes' fundamental metaphysics from meditations, seems to call for like a full phenomenological program. What the Descartes would have, the story of our lives. How does the life of a union be made? It seems that how can that be accounted for? It seems that the metaphysics doesn't give us much about that, because this is what he says to Elizabeth, for instance, that they don't bother about that. It's the ordinary life that gives us the best explanation, best account of what the life of the union is, and but we don't have this philosophical account by Descartes, and whether we have enough material to construct one for him, I'm somewhat doubtful. I think there are others who think that there really is a Cartesian phenomenology, that it needs to be written for Descartes, but that it was his aim, and that there are material for constructing one. I don't have a strong view about that, but I would say that I still think that this model of how contents get presented to us is well compatible with the embodiment and the union.
Thank you. Any other question or comment? Yes.
Yes, well, so with this, I think that we can have I can be wrong about my thoughts because there is this second order object, the representation in mind, and the next step, that is second order. And you said that the error may be in the stand that we take over the context, right? But cannot we be skeptic about the content itself, not the tense? Well, I think you already commented that, like, when I saw IT, what do you say?
So, okay, I'm not sure whether I understood what you mean by self-deception, in the sense that you can deceive yourself. I mean, I can deceive myself by thinking that I'm a good athlete or whatever. So stuff like that. So I can attribute things on me that are not really true, but I just believe it, right? So that type of thing is very, I mean, content heavy, in the sense that it would surely be in the place of the objective idea, right? It would surely be the place. I mean, it's like a proposition that I just accept. It happens to be false, but I make myself accept that. So that's one type of self-deception. But now like getting things wrong about whether I am thinking this thought, that seems that's in the heart of the cogito, right? So this is what they can say, that never mind what the contents are, never mind whether you buy the propositions that are presented to you, but try to doubt that you are the one who's been represented with this with these contents, and there is that you can't, right? And that's right. So that's I don't know. That's not self-deception. I mean, you having an illusion of yourself. I don't think that. I mean, now it depends on whether it is a question about whether Descartes in general can account for these issues, or whether there's something specific about the model that I have offered that would make Descartes more susceptible to these types of problems that he needs to explain away. And I'm not quite sure I see whether the difference between the model that I've suggested and the reflexive property view makes a difference there.
Well, I think we're thinking of saying that evolution seems impossible that I can now or I have an illusion about self-doubt, but about another companies in like nice about maybe perspective about content itself, tends towards the content that is above presented in the mind.
What do you mean by the stance?
It's what you said. On the question that like I can be so skeptic about the stance that I took towards the other. My question is, can you do that?
Okay, what I mean is that I can deceive myself by means of the stance I take towards the content. So if I accept the claim that I'm a great runner, say, then I might be deceiving me. But this deception happens in terms of affirming to something that's not right, and this something happens to concern myself, right? So that would be quite. I mean, if this is possible, it surely is possible on the model. So the model does not exclude this. Yeah. But whether there's some much more funkier way of being self-deceived that I would be deceived in my judgment that I mean, like the judgment itself, that it's not really a judgment. I would imagine that I judge about the content, but I'm not really judging, and I don't think Descartes allows this. Yeah. Thanks.
Well, we have time for maybe another comment or question. No, maybe you can close your
Well,
yes.
I don't know what to say, but I'm very grateful for so many of you coming. Mexico might be leading 5-0, we don't know. And you're still all here. So thank you for the many questions and your interest. It was a real pleasure to be here. Thanks.
Thank you.